in terms of our theoretical sort of abstractions, in terms of the ways in which epistemologists attempt to access information in the world. There has to be, on all accounts, a recognition that the information and data that's given always needs to be contextualized in many forms. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, as I said yesterday in my discussion of the correspondence theory of truth, because there's a whole huge debate on what really is the case. But at least at this introductory level, there is a recognition that there's content data that is given and, in a sense, projected towards our faculty of sensibility, and that our mind processes this information to make sense of our world. What the epistemologist needs to recognize then, right, is that insofar as this information is contextualized, it's contextualized in a living body. Right? You're not going to hear this in your sort of traditional epistemology classes, because this is not traditional. The very fact that I'm doing it online isn't traditional, right? In this much detail isn't traditional. But that's very, very important, right? The information, and this is where Descartes, remember, all of Stroud's discourse is focused on Descartes' meditations. I've decided to sort of step outside of that traditional discourse because there's a million different articles that have been written and a million different secondary interpretations of Descartes' meditations, which is in no sense to undercut Stroud. I mean, obviously I selected him because, one, I'm using the book, and two, because it's a great article. But the idea is there's enough of that in the world. I want to contribute something different, right? A little bit more advanced, but not too advanced, right? This is a little bit more difficult than a very true introduction to epistemology, and it's not so difficult that it makes this impractical. But this information, right, is contextualized within the body, right? The given is contextualized within. The given is contextualized within the body, right? And this is extremely important. In epistemology, the one thing that you need to recognize here is that in terms of generalization, especially in social sciences, this is the first real big caution, right? This is the first real caution of the lecture series in terms of epistemology. We have to, as epistemologists, recognize a note of caution in our epistemological assessment of the world. The world that we assess are typically relationship-based, right? We assess the nature of physical relationships between people or the relationships between more complex systems and structures. Most of that assessment is going to be contextualized within the body of the perceiver, right? So that the perceiver contextualizes information that's given from the world to make sense of the world. Obviously, in Descartes' meditation, the body then becomes the problem, right? So for Descartes, right? The body becomes the problem for Descartes. It becomes problematic. The question is, why does the body become problematic for Descartes? It becomes problematic precisely because the given is contextualized within the body, right? And we know the prior discourse from Descartes' meditations. Descartes situated as a rationalist in some sort of opposition to the empiricist. I hate presenting the dichotomy in such sort of generalized term, but Descartes, as quote unquote a rationalist, recognizes, and I don't want to go into a critique of Descartes per se, but in a sense demonizes the body for the mind, right? And then this is obviously prior to contemporary sort of physiology, contemporary anatomy, contemporary science, which articulates the mind as body. There is no demarcation between the mind and the body. And this first critique was posed in his lifetime in correspondence with Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia. She read Descartes, and she immediately posed the problem, well, the difference between the immaterial and the material, and how does the immaterial affect the material. I'm not going to get into that discourse now. I've already done a lecture series on Descartes. You're going to have to watch that on your own time to make sense of it. But the idea is absolutely critical here. This point is super critical. Because what Descartes does in problematizing the contextualization of the given world through the body is that he impairs, he weakens, he undermines the role and the relevance of the body as the, if you will, in contemporary discourse, sort of the processing unit, right? The body makes sense of the world. Now, Nietzsche would obviously have a problem with this, and I'm not going to get into a sort of a Nietzschean discourse. It wouldn't be fair at this point. But Nietzsche would have a tremendous problem with this because this is yet again another attempt to undercut physiology, right? And physiology as the sole, physiology as the sole mechanism of accessing what is in the world. Far too often, what we do is we resort to, we being sort of academics, we resort, without even recognizing it, to the Platonic demarcation between sort of transcendence and presence, right? So that we have a present existence as given, and it's mundane, and it is flawed, and it is prone to error. And we have a transcendent plane of existence, which is ethereal, which is immortal, which is ideal, which is perfect. It's not the case. I don't want all the Cartesian freaks jumping on and critiquing me, right? But the idea, no offense to the Cartesian freaks, right? But the idea is Descartes situates his discourse, whether willingly or unwillingly, in the tradition, in this Platonic tradition. The Platonic tradition still informs, right, this analysis. Why and how? Why it informs it is because historically, Plato's discourse precedes Descartes, obviously. Historically, Plato's discourse informs the tradition which regiments the demarcation between transcendence and presence, right? Descartes makes the body weak. He weakens the body for the mind, for the immaterial mind, right? He weakens the body precisely because it is context specific. Right? My body could be flawed. I can be inebriated. I could be hallucinating. I could be sleeping. I could be dreaming. I could be. Insofar as I could be doing X and X interfere with my proper perception of the given, well, then we have to regulate the conduct of the body, because the body then is prone to error. Right? And this is important in terms of epistemology and the historical rootedness in discourse and epistemology, because you're going to have a pretty huge feud between epistemologists that will brew precisely at this point. Some epistemologists still adhere to sort of this conceptual mechanism, right? Some epistemologists adhere to a realization that, no, it is the body, and it's only the body, and the contextualization of the given world in terms of sense data via the body is in no sense flawed, right? Why? Because all we need is that representational, unique instance in which we've identified something that truly is unique and truly can be generalized. Not everybody can do it, right? This isn't the case that we're looking for the ideal body. That's ridiculous, right? To take it that far, to say that there is then the ideal body which can properly and accurately always contextualize given information from the world that's fantasy, right? That doesn't occur in real life. We're prone to error as we age. We're prone to error while we're in our prime. Hubris can corrupt us while we're developing. Just complete lack of knowledge and certainty of our own bodies lead us to error. There's never an instance in which our bodies are going to accurately and perfectly always simultaneously interpret the given information in the world. We would be transcendent then. The attempt is, however, not to demonize the body. That's my intent in this, right? Irrespective of what Stroud's doing or irrespective of what Descartes' doing, my intent in presenting this is to let you know that insofar as we contextualize given sense data via the body, the traditional